Hello everyone, this is Aaron Fitch from ATF Gaming and welcome to the very first ATF NASCAR Weekly Review. This is the series that we will be doing on Monday every single week, where we review the weekend action in NASCAR and other stock car related events. So without further ado, we are going to start by reviewing this weekend, which was February 9th through 11th. We have the ARCA race, which happened on Saturday afternoon, evening, and then Daytona 500 qualifying and the Clash, which both happened on Sunday afternoon, which is a change for the Clash. It used to be scheduled for Saturday night. But we will start with the ARCA race. The first big headline for the ARCA race was Natalie Decker, the female driver driving for Venturini Motorsports, qualified on pole, I believe to be the first female driver to ever qualify on pole in the ARCA series. I know at least for Daytona that's true, but I don't watch the ARCA series enough to know that for sure. Race was relatively uneventful until the last lap, which is kind of sad, but the last lap is what will make this race go down in history as one of the weirdest races ever in ARCA history, I guarantee. So the ARCA rules are slightly different than NASCAR when it comes to overtime. In NASCAR, if you take the white flag and a caution comes out after the white flag, the race is over. It'll go down to timing and scoring. Now, the reason I believe ARCA has a different rule is because they don't have very good ways to get timing and scoring in those cars. They don't have the technology that the NASCARs do, so they throw a caution randomly and they can usually tell where people are. Because the ARCA series, they race on tracks that NASCAR doesn't go to. So they don't always have good camera angles. They don't have the information from the cars to decide those winners. So the ARCA rules, if a caution comes out after the white flag, they clear the caution, and then there's a one-lap shootout at the end. The ARCA race has to end under green is the rule. I think on 99% of the races in ARCA, that's going to be a fine rule. I actually thought it was a decent rule when I first heard about it, but obviously this race kind of messed that up, the perception of it for the public, because what happened is we had a wreck on the white flag, the very first white flag in regulation. A car got on its side and it stayed on its side, and they had to flip them off. It was a red flag, and so they red flagged the race. I can't blame ARCA for this, but I feel like it could have been better with the cleanup time. The cleanup time it took forever. Now NASCAR races, they obviously have the best crews. NASCAR brings their own crew in, but I feel like there should have been still a relatively decent crew to clean up these accidents. It took forever to clean up these accidents. So about 20 minutes later, after this first accident, they get going again, but they run so many laps under caution that some teams are running out of fuel because they pitted at a kind of far end of their fuel window, even past their fuel window. But there were a lot of caution laps, so people thought that they could make it to the end, but they didn't for the most part. So you had to see people coming in pitting and all that stuff. And then, so after that, they run about like 8 laps under yellow for some reason. I don't know why. And then they get the race started again, and then there's another caution on the white flag. So that brings another ridiculously long cleanup session because, again, apparently they just don't have enough people to clean up the track very quickly. There were jokes on Twitter about there was literally all of turns 3 and 4 was covered in speedy dry, and they were trying to brush it off to get it worked in so they could go back green, and it literally looked like they were racing on Daytona Beach again, honestly. So there was lots of jokes going on Twitter. And by the time they got back to green, that was the last yellow. By the time they got back to green, it had been over an hour since the very first white flag. Over an hour for one lap. That's bad. And this is by far the most popular ARCA race going on. So this has to be terrible for ARCA, because there were so many people making a laughing stock on Twitter about them, and I feel bad for them. It's a great series. They had a 39-car field at Daytona, which is incredible for a lower-tier series. The NASCAR Cup Series can barely get a full field of 40 cars now. So for the ARCA series, that is great. So overall, after all that mess, an hour to take the last lap, Michael Self wins, and Natalie Decker, who started on pole, ended up finishing 5th. So that's the ARCA race. Normally, I probably won't talk about the ARCA race very much, but since we are limited in the action that was going on this weekend, and that was a very decent race to talk about, I talked about it this week. Probably won't ever talk about it again. Next up is the Daytona 500 qualifying, which is on Sunday. They started at noon. And the first car out, they went in inverse order of the practice speed. So the first car that was supposed to be out was the 23 car, Greg Alding, for BK Racing. But they didn't even make an attempt. My understanding was they went through the new inspection, which I'll talk about in a minute. They went through the new inspection, they failed inspection, they didn't even try to fix it, and they just went back to the garage and didn't even go out on pit road. So, obviously, BK Racing is in some financial hurt right now, but I feel like you at least should try to make a lap in qualifying. I feel like if you don't, that should be equal to a DNQ. Did not qualify, because you didn't go out for qualifying. So I feel like that NASCAR should disqualify them and remove their charter. But again, I understand that they're in a financial situation. I understand that they're probably going to start and park, but at least go out, pass inspection, because you're going to have to go through the same thing on Thursday for the duels and for the race on Sunday. So why not just get it out of the way now? Pass inspection, make a lap. I don't care if you're going 50 miles per hour around the thing. Make a lap, bring it in, you're done. That's all you need to do. You've qualified for the race. But they decided not to do that, and I personally am not very thrilled about that, and I think they should have their charter revoked. So yeah. The only other car that had any issues during qualifying was the 38 car of David Bragan. He went out, and I don't know if something happened with the engine or what, but they basically aborted the lap and did not complete a lap. So those two were 39th and 40th on the grid. Just some notables for the qualifying. Danica Patrick, she qualified 28th. She was around the fastest of the lower funded team, because remember, she's in Premium Motorsports, and they are not a well-funded team. Obviously, they got a lot of help considering GoDaddy's sponsorship, and I believe they got a partnership with Richard Childress Racing for this race to help them with their cars and stuff. But she qualified 28th. The only other low-funded team in my mind that I think did better was Michael McDowell. A big name that did not do well at all this weekend, honestly, practice and qualifying, was Martin Truex Jr. He qualified 26th. That's not good for him, for the reigning NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series champion. So those were just two names that I saw that struggled. Obviously, big teams did well here. Both Hendrick and Joe Gibbs had all four of their drivers in the top 10. So they obviously did well. I believe the only other cars that were in there were Ricky Stenhouse, Paul Menard, Kevin Harvick, and I think that's it. There might be one more, but I can't think of right now. But that was your top 12 right there. Then they did the second round of qualifying, and Alex Bowman and Denny Hamlin start on the front row, with Bowman getting the pole. Huge news. I really think Bowman deserves it. He spent a lot of time in practice working on qualifying trim. I don't even think he did a single drafting practice, which might come back to bite him in the duels. But honestly, now that he's on the pole, he can take that time in the duels. Hopefully he doesn't wreck out and have to start in the back. And then Denny Hamlin qualified second, so good for him. His first front row start for the Daytona 500. And so those are the only 2 spots that are locked in right now. All the other 38 spots from third on back will be locked in the duels. Odd numbers will be in the first duel. Even numbers will be in the second duel on Thursday night. I look forward to that. I will have that as part of my review for next week. So that's qualifying, and now for the Clash. The Clash was really our first deep look at the new rules package. Now, not many people made a big deal out of the rules package in the offseason because there really weren't that many changes. But the restrictor plate rules did change quite a bit. There is no more ride height rule. So you could have the back of those cars as low as possible, which gives you a lot more speed. They tried to up the rear spoiler to take away some of that speed, but they were fast and they were out of control. The reason that there weren't that many big incidents in this race, the Clash, was because you had only 17 drivers and the 17 best and most experienced drivers. The Daytona 500, in my opinion, is going to be a wreck fest. I hope people really take the duels seriously and learn a lot in the duels, because if they don't, this Daytona 500 is going to be a wreck fest, and it's going to be very similar to what was it, Indy last year, where we had top 10 of nobodies. So I really hope that that's not the case, but that's what I'm seeing going forward. So in the Clash was also our first look at the new pit road rules. You could only have 4 people servicing the car, and then you have the fuel man who can't do anything. At least that's how the Fox Sports guys described it to me, and that's how I'll use it here. If I'm wrong, then blame Mike Joy and Larry McReynolds. But the fastest 4-tire pit stop, they said, was around 16 seconds, which is about a 5-second difference from where pit crews were last year. So, and then they interviewed one of the guys, Denny Hamlin's pit crew guys, and they said it's just awkward. It really is. So I think pit road's going to be a huge story when we get to the duels and the Daytona 500 especially. I don't know how long the duels are. Don't know how many pit stops would be involved there. But even with all of the new rules and the first 25 laps, they had a caution at lap 25. It was good racing, but I think they realized very quickly that they could not sustain that racing very long. So the 17 drivers, they went single file for around 30-35 laps in that second segment. And it was incredibly boring. And that's the kind of stuff that NASCAR tried to get rid of with the old rules package. Now, I think it's going to be a very different story when you have more cars in the Daytona 500. But I would not at all be surprised if the duels end up in a single-file race. Because people are just learning. Because it seems like a minor change to the rules package, but apparently it's not. So really, the majority of the race was fairly boring. There was a wreck at the end after the white flag. It was single file. And then a bunch of people tried to get in, and then I believe it was Kyle Larson. He had a huge run on Jimmy Johnson, but he had nowhere to take it. So he didn't let off at all. He just ran straight through Jimmy Johnson, spun him out, caused a 6-car wreck, and the race ended pretty much there. They didn't throw the caution, but nothing really happened afterwards. Brad Keselowski won the race. Joey Logano finished second. I believe Kurt Busch finished third. Overall, we learned a lot about the new package, but it was also an incredibly boring race for about 60% of the race. And obviously the duels will, I think, be very similar. People are just learning the package, and we're going to learn a lot more about the pit road situation as well. The only other thing that I can think about talking about is during the Clash, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. got penalized for passing below the yellow line. Now, I want to compare this situation to what happened to Regan Smith at Talladega, where he was racing Tony Stewart. This was, 5-6 years ago. Regan Smith passed Stewart below the yellow line, but it was, in my opinion, very clear that he didn't have a choice. If he would have held his ground, they both would have wrecked. And this is an incredibly similar situation to what happened with Ricky Stenhouse today. They were 3 wide. He got underneath Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch pushed him down below the yellow line. Kyle Busch was obviously slow, so Stenhouse completed the pass, and they penalized him. I don't think that's right. I think they need to redefine that rule a little bit better. Because Steve O'Donnell, he tweeted about it, said, the rule is very clear. Yes, it may have looked confusing, but the rule is very clear. Pass below the yellow line, get penalized. So I think that's going to lead to a lot of wrecks if they don't redefine that rule within next year. I don't think they need to change the rule. I just think they need to redefine the wording of the rule so it's a lot clearer whether they should penalize a person if they get forced down. They need to define what forced down looks like. So, overall, that's the recap of this weekend. I look forward to bringing this series to you every Monday, maybe even Sunday if the Cup races on Saturday. So I look forward to that. If you have any recommendations for things you would like me to do with this series, be sure to leave them in the comments below. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And if you want to see more content from ATF Gaming, be sure to hit that red subscribe button. It really means a lot to me, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.